At this time, we would like to take a moment to thank each and every one of our listeners who did show up for the live view, who bought tickets and were able to be with us on stream. Again, thank you so much.
It wasn't expected for you guys to do that, but it was amazing, and we got to see a lot of the community come together already.
Yes, we had a lot of fun doing it, and we really hope to see you on future live streams. This will be a perfect chance actually to talk about the Paranormal History Academy podcast Patreon, or PAHAPAPA, as I like to call it.
Yes, we have 3 different tiers as of right now, and we hope that you guys come and check it out. We have the founding alumni, and student.
Yes, and they go kind of in the reverse order from that. Student $5, alumni 10, founding alumni 20. Founding alumni is only done for the first season, but you get to rep that status for the entire duration of the podcast, whether we do 4 seasons, 8 seasons, 100 seasons, however long you guys want this to go, and however long we have content for and don't get our butts sued.
Hello, and welcome to the Paranormal History Academy, the only academy that lets you use your phones.
Yes, if you found some other means of listening to this podcast other than your electronic devices, then maybe we should be investigating you.
Maybe you might be one of our episode stars.
Yes.
Today, we're going to be talking about the Demon of Brownsville Road. I am Professor Brandon, your paranormal researcher.
And I'm your resident historian, Professor Travis.
Like I said, Travis, we're going over the Demon of Brownsville Road. What does that kind of entail?
So it's a very interesting story. It kind of deals mainly here in the Pittsburgh area. It's very recent, actually, with most of the events taking place in the mid 2000s into the late 2000s. So it's kind of fresh. It's interesting. It's not like your normal, hey, we're going to go over this asylum that operated in the 1800s and all this. So it's fresh. It's new. The book was written by Bob Cranmer, the man that these events allegedly happened to, as well as Erica Manfred. So that's going to be a really big source of information we have because they're firsthand accounts, but we do have supplementary information we were able to dig up on them as well.
That should be pretty good for us, and that really helps us out. It's strange that it did happen so early in the year, or in the years.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's interesting. It's brand new. It's kind of cool that it's like this just happened like a decade ago. What? This stuff usually hear about it happening in Italy in the 1400s. So it's interesting. But first, before we can get into that, we kind of have to go over who exactly is Bob Cranmer Sr. So Bob Cranmer Sr. is a born and raised Pittsburgh resident. He grew up in the outer area of Pittsburgh, eventually moved out, went into the Army as a counterintelligence officer in Fort Campbell, and then married his wife, Lisa. They had 4 kids, Jessica, Bobby Jr., Charlie, and David, in that order, if I'm not mistaken. Eventually decided that the Army was not the life for him anymore because he had a family, and it's harsh on family. We all know this. We're a cast of veterans doing this, so we're kind of all familiar with it. Moved back to Pittsburgh to Brentwood Township into a 3406 Brownsville Road. Now, this is the house that the entire story is based around and where all the happenings occurred or allegedly occurred. Now, right out the start, I'm told to understand that we had paranormal happenings right as they were viewing the house. Isn't that right, Brandon?
Yes, actually. One of the bigger things that was known was that Bobby Cranmer himself had an encounter. When the Joyces and Cranmers were in the basement, Bobby was out kind of looking around upstairs, probably trying to figure out which room he wanted. Like, ooh, the biggest one, that's the one I want. And
that's fair.
We've all done it, let's be honest here. He was heard wailing in the foyer. Just from that, they could hear him downstairs. That's how loud he was. Yeah, they're in the basement. They actually heard him wailing.
Especially with how big this house is. If you look at the floor plan of this house, it's massive. Like, it was built in the early 1900s by a very wealthy family. So it's just a huge open floor plan. So he had to be wailing pretty hard.
When they found him, his eyes were closed shut and he looked terrified. They told him, hey, you can open your eyes now. We're here. As soon as they opened them, he would close them even tighter. That's how terrified he was. He supposedly saw something.
I mean, he could have just saw their 90-year-old neighbor in their see-through nightgown reaching a paper like, Mr. Richards, what are you doing?
Why is the nightgown see-through?
Hey, we don't kink shame here on the Paranormal History Academy podcast. So I don't know. Mr. Richards might like the free-flowing elegance of it. Who am I to say? I made this up. Why are you on me about this?
because I'm a little bit scared for your well-being.
My therapist says so too, but that's a story for a later date.
Speaking of therapists, Lisa and Bobby both had different type of therapists, didn't they?
Yes, they did. There's several psychological happenings kind of with them that we can get into. We're going to divulge into as we kind of go periodically through the happenings in this podcast. So it's actually pretty interesting. But before we go into that, we should really more talk about Bob Cranmer and his time in political office, because as it seems is some of these psychological happenings could have been a direct result of his time in politics, really, and the strains that come with that. So Bob Cranmer, and the onset of buying his house in 1988, a few years later, after he fails to get into Baptist ministry, he decides instead to go into politics, starting out as a member of the Brentwood Town Council, which is where his house is located in Brentwood Township, and eventually moving on to become the Allegheny County Commissioner. Now, the city of Pittsburgh is the seat of Allegheny County, so it's got a pretty big population base, a lot of happenings, and from what he described, a lot of political corruption of that time, including with the police departments, a lot of stuff happening there, a lot of internal corruption and organized crime, and how he describes his time fighting these elements. Well, while he's doing this in the early to mid 1990s, we start to see a manifestation of some psychological problems, especially within Bobby Jr. And Lisa, his wife, I feel that they were going through all this stress as part of his political career because it's long days. There's a lot of, they go to school. There's probably a lot of bullying. He lists himself as the first Republican commissioner in Allegheny County since the 1930s, I believe. And there's
honestly, it does sound like they were cracking. If you looked at how they started acting near the end, it sounded like they were just too much stress on them.
Absolutely, especially the eyes on people like that, especially as Bob Cranmer states, he's changing all of these laws. He's going after all these corrupt politicians, as he calls them, within the Allegheny County. That's going to create a lot of enemies, and that's going to cause havoc for his family as well. The family suffers just as much as they do. But in Bobby Jr.'s case, this is a little bit different. As he starts going to see a psychiatrist, he ends up being diagnosed with bipolar 1, which is manic depression. So if you've ever known anyone with bipolar 1, well, obviously, first off, bipolar is hereditary. It's not, you don't just develop bipolar ever. It's got to be passed on, from parent to child and so on and so forth, or through generations. And manic depression involves violent outbursts, followed by bouts of deep depression afterwards, or guilt for the violent outbursts. It's kind of a back and forth cycle. But Bobby Jr. did have a lot of reported violent outbursts, including one big one, which was a fight with Bob Cranmer when he turned 18. Bob Cranmer ended up being arrested and sent out in cuffs, wasn't allowed to return to his house for several months after this. So that's kind of fits the bill. He attributes it to demonic infestation or demonic influence, but again, bipolar is not something that's really can be created. A demon doesn't just give someone bipolar. You're born with it. It's something you're raised with. Lisa's on the other hand. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say it definitely does add some type of paranormal possibility, though. I mean, violence kind of relates to demonic possession. I'm not saying it was demonic possession. I'm just saying that it does happen here and there.
It does, but it doesn't fit the psychological diagnosis with Bobby, because bipolar 1 people are very prone to violent outbursts. It's already something that they struggle with constantly, as opposed to bipolar 2, which is hypomania. It just means you're energetic. You're constantly going, you're reeling, you're going very, very fast all the time, which is kind of the counterpoint to it. That's why there's 1 and 2. Now, Lisa, on the other hand, I feel hers is directly attributed to Bob Cranmer's political career and how rough it is, because she was also a member of the PTA. She'd do a lot with the teachers in schools. She was very active on the school board. To one point, she even went to the state capital, Harrisburg, to petition the closing of one of the schools in the district. And, all this time she spent, all this action she helped, tied with her trying to raise 4 kids, while Bob is pretty much absent this whole time, because he even describes when he was in office, he would go in early in the morning and he wouldn't come home till late at night. Kids would be asleep. So it's just this, I feel, was more the stress of her raising kids. She eventually just kind of broke, had all this anxiety, ended up not paying bills. Like bills went unpaid. Bob Cranmer even found like a stack of notices like for foreclosure for the house because they weren't paying the mortgage. So a lot of these psychological problems kind of don't fit the bill. The one I would say could kind of fit within the realm of demonic infestation or demonic subjection is Charlie, one of the younger sons. So Charlie was diagnosed with severe anxiety, but he was also prone to bouts of self-mutilation and self-harm. Now, with people that have anxiety, it can go either way, but more often than not, anxiety manifests in a way that your body's reacting against a stressor because you don't want to hurt. You react to something with anxiety, like, hold up, that could hurt me. I could hurt. I don't want that. I don't want that. And you're pushing yourself away from these stressors. Now, if you are prone to self-mutilation, self-harm, that kind of goes, it's the antithesis to anxiety because your body's reacting to stressors in a way not to get hurt. Whereas this is you're deliberately going out of your way to harm people. And if I'm not mistaken, that has a direct biblical influence as well, because your body being a temple, the Bible says you're not allowed to mutilate your body. You're not allowed to do harm to yourself.
Actually, no, it doesn't. It states that you're not supposed to hurt yourself in any way. Demons try to take what the Bible says and reverse it, and it sounds like it was doing that here. It possibly could have been carving anything into what that person was cutting themselves for. It's very weird. I kind of wish that there was a little bit more on what was happening, more than just he was cutting himself. Maybe if he was saying some weird stuff in Latin or anything like that, it would have been a lot cooler too.
It's just walk down the hall in the middle of the night. Charlie, what are you doing? It's just Latin. I don't know Latin, so I can't say anything in Latin. But I just, that would freak me out. I'd probably leave that house. It'd be like, you stay in the hallway. I'm going out here.
Throw some holy water on them. Holy water on them. It might actually do something. If not, then well.
But it can go either way. It can really just be medical diagnoses. It could just be mental illness, or they could chalk it up to demonic infestation. But it's hard to tell with mental illness as opposed to this, because the Catholic Church has had a long-standing history of misdiagnosing mental illness for demonic possession. Heck, in the United States, up until the 70s, epilepsy itself was considered to be a form of demonic possession. They considered that reaction, those epileptic seizures, to be the cause of other mental illness.
Thankfully, there is some good news, though, because the Catholic Church has started to look into mental illness and started to roll that out from exorcisms. So they've done better.
And as we kind of stated in the disclaimer for this episode, there is a bit of this whole story is going to be looked at kind of under a lens of the Catholic faith, because the Catholic Arch Diocese of Pittsburgh are involved, including Father Ron Langwin, who is now the Archbishop for the Pittsburgh Archdiocese. And his, I don't want to say boss, but the person that sat atop him was shortly involved. Archbishop Worrell, now Cardinal Worrell, who is the Cardinal of Washington, D.C. So he oversees all of the archdioceses in the United States. So there's some big name players in the Catholic Church taking an interest in here and focusing on this happening in this house. So it kind of gives a little more credibility in that regard. But again, everything here is kind of looked at through the lens of Catholic faith. So there's going to be some things that are like, well, the Catholic Church says this is wrong. On a personal level, you might not see it that way. We may not see it that way as well, but we're trying to be unbiased and just say it.
Now, to begin with some of the paranormal happenings, because this gets weird from the start. The very first thing that we start to notice is in the foyer, there's a coat closet and there's a pull chain. Mm. The weirdest thing is that Bob Cranmer himself focuses on this pull chain more than anything else happening in the house. And that's because it raises itself up and wraps around the light. He freaks out about that so much so that he will open the door, pull it down, keep it there, make sure that is down, close it. 5 minutes later, go back, open it. Sure enough, it's up on the light again.
Yeah, the sheer force of will he has in just zeroing in on this light pull cord is kind of amazing, because I wouldn't have caught it. I wouldn't have caught any of this until the walls were bleeding. I would have just obliviously just went through my life like, whatever, I'm too tired to deal with this. Black cloaked figure in my grandson's bedroom. Maybe just daughter's wearing some black dress. I don't know.
Just saw The Grudge one too many times, wants to try to dress like her.
I would not have zeroed in on this that quickly. But yeah, so he does. If I'm to understand correctly, he even goes to the extreme of tying rosaries to the pull cord.
Yeah, that's the weirdest part, is that he ties the rosary to it, and it proceeds to be put on the rack itself, and then the light cord's just brought up. Like, it didn't care that the rosary was there. It's like, I'm just going to put this here.
It's just like a prank. Like, oh, okay, well, I can't, hold on. We're just going to take that off. We're going to sit over here. We're going to wrap it up again. So this kind of more attributes to like a light poltergeist activity, right? This doesn't really attribute to a demonic presence just yet.
Oh, definitely. It even is seen to like move picture frames here and there, pull furniture.
And I believe that was the case. We even had a report of it moving a chair in the basement.
Yes, it would. There's a furnace in the basement, and it would always pull this chair over to be looking at the furnace. It would actually get the chair from Bob's workshop and put it in there.
Now he lists this off as like, who knows what that is. That the part where I never sit in front of this furnace, I maybe don't have that radio on at night, or I know I turned it off. These things he just brushed off. Oh, maybe I forgot to do that. Like you stated, you never sit in front of that wood burner. So how would you? Maybe I forgot to put it back. That you don't focus on, but this light pull cord you do.
The weirdest thing is that, like you said, he does say that the radio would be turned on, that lights would be turned on, strange smells would be around the place, smelling of burning tires
Taco
and
day.
Sulfur.
Definitely Taco Day.
Probably.
We've all been there.
But no, he would focus on that stuff, and no reason to focus on it.
Yeah, and if I'm to understand correctly, the sulfuric smell and all that we're getting into the realm of reported demonic presence.
Yes, when you start to smell sulfur, it's probably time to call a priest, because that could be demonic.
So now we finally have something that kind of pointed in the direction that they're alleging that these happenings were caused by. And so it was kind of at these points where he's finally started. This is kind of after he got out of politics. And I believe he started working as a lawyer. I know he was working for a law office for a long period of time there. So what he ended up doing is now he reached out to the Passionist ministry down the road, which he had helped. He had done a few like volunteer work things there, like putting up crosses and stuff like that. He now reached out to them and was responded by a Father Mike, who then was kind of like the man on the ground throughout the whole of this, performing Catholic mass in their living room and throughout the rooms in the house, throwing holy water down, reciting passages, all that fun little Catholic stuff to like, hey, maybe this will work in lieu of an actual exorcism.
The weird thing about throwing holy water around the house is actually supposed to be marking the house for quote unquote good.
Ah,
and
I just throw water around to throw water around.
Wow, I mean that you're kind of weird too. So maybe you're just marking it for chaos sakes.
I would totally fill up a bunch of balloons with like holy water and just run into a balloon fight and just peg it. Like, yeah.
Oh, man, wouldn't that be great if they started?
Then it hits me with acid or something, just down.
Now, you mentioned the demon was actually making the walls bleed as well. Because we had the marking of good, that actually is the demon trying to mark the house for bad or evil.
Water versus blood, which is kind of counterpoint, I'd think, because the Bible, blood is important. The blood of Christ is kind of the everything there.
It could be just mockery, as demons are known to do.
Yeah, demons love to mock things. So do I. Maybe am I? No, it can't be. But before we start going into more of this paranormal, it's kind of important we go over a little bit of the history of the house at 3406 Brownsville Road. So one thing we definitely want to point out, this house was originally built in 1909 and finished construction in 1910 by the Malicks, a wealthy merchant family. But the history of this land goes further back than that, to even the years of our fledgling nation, back to the year 1792 with the Brown family. So there was a Deliverance Brown who lived in the area. His homestead was kind of on the land that 3406 Brownsville Road sat on, in the area that was today as Brentwood Township. So in this bit of time, as the nation was expanding and gaining more land, they start getting into skirmishes with Native American tribes. So this is kind of very common history. We all know, I'm sure we've all learned it in some way, shape, or form. But what they don't tell you is Western Pennsylvania was kind of a hotbed for it, even after the French and Indian War. As we see settlement out west, the Indians start protesting, like, hey, you can't move in. This is holy land to us. We don't want anyone living here. As that escalated, the Native American tribes decided to move to more dire practices, namely, in the Brown family's case, Mr. Deliverance Brown came back to find that his wife and 2 kids had been murdered and scalped, and then his homestead burned down. We corroborated this with letters from Fort Pitt to the then Secretary of War of the United States regarding these matters. And he buried his family on the settlement where his homestead was and planted an oak tree above it. Now, the one thing I do have to kind of make a note of is how out of the ordinary this occurrence is. Even with Native Americans, they normally do not kill women and children in this time. It's really not their way. It's kind of against their principles. What they do normally do is they'll capture women and children. They'll either make them slaves to help out in their nomadic culture with hunting, gathering, so on and so forth, or they would be known at times to ransom them back to the American government for resources, namely firearms or any other sort of material they can use. So this was really out of the ordinary for this to happen, but it was kind of a rise in events and an escalation of, us settling into that area and them protesting it. So this can be corroborated. So this history was later corroborated, and Mr. Cranmer did hire a company that deals in ground penetrating radars to actually look under this oak tree, and they did find 3 objects that they could reasonably concur that they were the remains of the Brown family. Fast forward a little bit now into the early 1900s, when the Malik family were having this house built. There was a lot of mishaps even in the construction of this house. A few workers getting injured. I know one was reported to have walked off saying this place is cursed. And there's even some alleged activity of someone actively cursing the house. Now, the Maliks were very wealthy at this time. They were a wealthy merchant family. And Mrs. Malik was reportedly very beautiful, but had a very sour disposition, which gained her the moniker with the workers, the rich bitch. So it kind of gave a sour disposition. And I know one of the workers allegedly put a type of curse on this house. I know you can tell us a little more about this Italian-based curse.
Yes. So, like you said, the curse did originate in Italy. It's a little bit weird for German workers to be putting a curse that originates in Italy on the house, but
Mr. Europe here.
I digress. The curse itself was pronounced Malocchio. And this curse, it translates to the evil eye.
I get that a lot.
It's believed to cause misfortune and physical problems. So, like your back problems, your headaches.
Ooh, or, that's too real. Maybe I'm cursed.
It could be, but a good way to test that actually is to get a bowl of water and 3 olives.
That's why I have this bowl of olives here. Huh.
Are you sure those are olives?
I don't know.
They look kind of like Lucky Charms.
Yeah, it makes sense. When did I eat cereal?
That's weird. But you drop those 3 olives into the bowl, and if they form the shape of an eye, you are cursed.
I'm cursed.
If it forms the shape of an eye.
Okay, well, I'll have to test this because I'm pretty sure, based on those symptoms, it could be very much precluded to be cursed.
Good news is, though, there is a way to get rid of this curse, and the best time to do it is Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve.
Yes.
So I've always had a funny time with a lot of these legends and their significance around the time of Christmas or Christian holidays. Easter can be more easily precluded as why it would hold a holy significance, but Christmas itself is based around the winter solstice, in that time period when the North Star is more prominent in the night sky due to the story of the wise men. Biblically and historically speaking, there really is no information that gives us anything to know when, Jesus Christ was born. We don't know what time of year it was. Calendars were different. There was a lot of different things, a lot of non-communication between nations at the time. So we really don't have anything to preclude that. Records were almost non-existent. So we really have no clue. They just coincided with that winter vortex in the meaning of the story of his birth.
I mean, it could mean new life as well, because Christmas time, you think of kind of death, but it could just try to mean new life for everybody.
It could. There could be significance in there, and it comes into the human conscious and how it perceives these things. So, I mean, there's arguments back and forth on whether, the actual human subconscious is in some way creating a lot of these paranormal situations. So, but yeah, that always struck me funny as Christmas. Hey, do this on Christmas, but there's no significance to Jesus' actual birth on that date. But
well, if you believe it, it could be that. What you have to do, though, is if you are cursed, is you have to make a cross with both hands. Now, I know what you're thinking. You do not cross them like making it into a cross.
I don't cross my fingers.
No, what you're doing is you're making the kind of Spider-Man looking sign and making it so your index finger is pointing straight up towards the sky. So that way it looks like more like a cross.
I don't know. That looks weird to me. That doesn't really look much like a cross. You can get your fingers like perfectly horizontal. I can't. I can't do that. I have to like break my pinky to get it facing the right way.
But you do that with both of your hands, and you have a loved one say a prayer for you using the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Okay, now if I don't have any loved ones, is store-bought fine?
Go to your local church. The grandmothers will love you, and you'll probably get snacks too.
Ooh, I love me some Rice Krispie treats.
Now, you have to repeat this prayer that they said a total of 3 times.
Already too much work for me.
It's still going on too, because then you have to say an Our Father, Hail Mary, and a Glory Be.
I think I'm just gonna stay cursed. That's a lot to remember.
I mean, if someone was jealous and envious of you and
doubtful,
you had to do all of that, I don't know. The weirdest thing is that you can also curse yourself. Like, you can curse people not even meaning to, but you can curse yourself as well. How are you jealous or envious of yourself is my question.
Look at this guy and his devilishly good looks. Oh, wait, that's me.
Honestly, that's what it sounds like. It's kind of weird.
Envious that everyone else gets to look at my face and I don't know. That's not true at all. Please don't be under the misconception that I'm a beautiful human being.
So that is what the curse is. That is the supposed curse that this German worker put on the house.
Yeah, again, not to dial back, but it is kind of interesting that we get a German worker, because it was a German contractor that built this house for the Maliks. And there's an Italian curse somehow placed on there. I just don't really get that too much, but hey, it is what it is. Now, to go back into a little more of the history. So after the house was built, the Maliks did live there for a good while. It changed hands a few times. I know once in the late 40s, they had lived there. I believe it was the Paisleys. They'd lived there all the way till 1971, or it might be later, 1979, to when the Maliks moved in. Or not the Maliks, the Joyces. I apologize. The Joyces moved in until 1988 when selling it to the Cranmers. But there was some happening still while the Maliks lived there. As we know, his house was constructed in 1910. Fast forward a couple of decades, we get into the early 1930s. The Great Depression had hit. It hit everyone alike, rich and poor. So the Maliks were obviously falling on hard times. They were approached allegedly by, as Mr. Cranmer elicits, a Dr. M. But we can use historical data and residential records at that time to actually conclude this was, in fact, a Dr. Mahan Sr., just because it coincides with the house that they claim he resided in at that time, right down the road, which was also supposedly another haunted location. Now, Dr. Mahan, I apologize, Dr. Mahan Sr. Allegedly approached the Maliks intending to rent out the Blue Room, which is actually the room Bobby Jr. had stayed in during his time here, to perform kind of illegal abortions out of the area. Now we know that abortions are kind of a hot button issue at this time. They had a very negative connotation, both biblically and societally, namely because abortions at the time didn't have the medical science we have today. Doctors were never trained on it. It wasn't a known practice. So they resorted to some other less reputable methods, namely speaking, hey, I want you to drink this bottle of diazepam. And if you don't overdose, or if you don't die from the overdose, more likely, then you're not pregnant. And so sometimes, or it involved direct surgery and things like that, but it was less safe. So there was a lot of casualties, I'd say, not only them being late term and the unborn children involved, but also the mothers. I believe there was actually 2 occurrences where the mothers passed away during these procedures.
Which actually that does kind of correspond with a lot that happens in the Blue Room.
Yes, yeah, there is actually a lot of activity that goes on in the Blue Room, even right from the beginning when Bobby Jr., who had seen something on the first or the second floor landing in this house, allegedly, he's staying in that room for the first several years. He would not sleep in his bed there. He'd sleep in the closet. They eventually had to bring a mattress in and lay it down in the closet because he slept there. He would not sleep in his bed.
Now, there actually could be a reason for that, and that is because one day he was staying home from sick.
Staying home from school sick. There we go. I try to stay home from sick all the time.
I try to stay home from sick too, but he stayed home from school sick. And when his mother and family were out, he looked over and saw what he described as a child made of lightning running down the hallway, being chased by a black figure.
I don't even know where to begin to fathom that, like a child made of lightning.
Yes, Nikolai Tesla is still alive and well, just in child form running.
Yeah, he's in purgatory running around the Cranmer house.
So first of all, he thought that was weird, but he got terrified when he saw the creature start to come back into the room and looking over him on his bed. He, as a smart child would, pulled the covers over his head to try and hide from this thing. And as Bob Cranmer describes, the creature, as Bob Cranmer describes
it's still
in
Bob.
His book, it's still Bob.
Yeah.
As he describes, it pulls the sheets or covers down and folds them at the edge of his bed.
I mean, that's impressive. Maybe the demon just wanted to show off its like mad folding skills. Just look at that. Look how fast I can fold these. I can do your bed every day for one goat head a day.
One goat head a day, record time.
I'll make your bed for you.
Now the question is though, would you be terrified or would you actually be like, hey man, can you teach me those skills?
Yeah, no, I'd be asking him. Yeah, I'd be like, hey, can you give me this? Like, can you show me this? This would actually be pretty awesome.
What ended this entire instance, though, is a bright white light in the shape of a human coming down over his bed and kind of stopping it. He just closes his eyes, looks up, and everything's gone again. But honestly, it's kind of weird, though, because a bright white light could have definitely been Thomas Edison coming to save Nikolai Tesla.
Especially in the description, because Bobby Cranmer describes him as a human shape as a light bulb.
Oh, yeah. So it's definitely Thomas Edison.
Yeah, maybe it is Nikolai Tesla. Maybe he's trying to find him like, Edison, you jerk, you stole all my ideas. Like maybe they're just having this eternal feud, and this demon or whatever it is actually the referee, just trying to like, hey, no, come on, hurt him like cats. Like, no, you stay over there. You leave Mr. Edison alone. You leave Mr. Tesla alone.
I could totally see that. And the weirdest thing still is that if you fast forward a couple of years, you have Lisa and Bob Cranmer staying in there.
Mm-hmm.
And they see in that room and in the adjacent bathroom a rusty, bloody, red-orange looking pile of liquid that they describe as a birthing fluid smell.
Huh. Yeah, I believe it was Lisa that pointed out. Now I know that, Lisa Cranmer, she had 4 children. That
yes.
cannot cannot be discounted at all. But her spatial awareness, then, if she was in the middle of giving birth, which has always been referred to as like one of the most painful experiences a human being can go through, but you remember the smell of the birthing fluid, that just seems odd that's like fresh in your brain. Like, I know what this smells like. That smells like birthing fluid. I wouldn't remember. I'd be like too focused on the horrible, horrible pain I'm going through birthing this child and the joy of then getting to hold this child.
Yeah, that's one of the weirdest things that they describe is that, yes, it smells like birthing fluid. I don't know how she came to that conclusion almost immediately, but she did.
Yeah, we don't really know. It could have been later on in the book that they just said, oh yeah, we later determined it smelled like birthing fluid. But yeah, it's just interesting. I never understood that connection.
Which it gets into the kind of defense that they started making to stop this thing from continually hurting / haunting them. And one of the best ways that they did it was putting Passion of the Christ on 24/7 in the Blue Room.
I mean, I've never really seen Passion of the Christ, but I know if you put really any movie on, namely a Mel Gibson movie, I probably would not be happy about it being on constantly either. So, I mean, I can't really blame it in that regard.
It's weird because they're trying to sit there and say the story of Jesus Christ being put to the cross, that could be stopping this thing from happening. Why would that stop a demon?
Yeah,
that's the weirdest thing.
I don't know, especially in the regards that like demons. So a lot of times movies and media depict demons as being harmed, like physically harmed near a rosary or anything religious, when it's really not the case, biblically speaking, and through a lot of records at the Vatican and a lot of other things. Demons aren't damaged by these. They hate it. They once were holy beings as well, but they decided to leave when Lucifer was cast down. All this stuff happened. So it's not really it destroys them or hurts them. It's more of an extreme hatred. It's like something you just absolutely can't stand. Like, I cannot be in the same room as that. I hate that. I don't want that near me.
Which it's kind of funny that you do mention that, because the demon would start to destroy the rosaries. It would start fusing links together to make it impossible to hold, where you have the rosary in between your hands. Or
yeah, you'd have it draped over your hands, like in the traditional praying motion with your two hands put together. You'd have the rosary. I can't even talk today. Draped over those hands and hanging down off the end as you say your prayers, and it would take the links apart and put them together in a way that you couldn't use it that way. It even went so far as to break crosses and mutilate them.
Supposedly would also steal crosses, and they would just not show up, which you have to wonder, what did it do with it then?
Yeah, I don't know. One part, Bob Cranmer Sr. Says that he was told to go out and buy gold cross necklaces for all of his family. And he does go out and he buys all these gold cross necklaces. And at one point, Bobby Jr.'s, while he's wearing it at night, slips off his neck and onto the floor while still linked, like still clipped together. So it's really interesting that these things just kind of oddly happen. Lisa Cranmer says a very similar thing happened to her. Her necklace was on, it was clipped, clasp was done, and it slid off her neck, still clasped together.
That demon is just flexing on these guys so hardcore.
He's like, I can fold sheets, I can take necklaces off you without unclasping them. I think we're actually dealing with the ghost of Chris Angel.
Probably.
Even though he's still alive.
Well,
or maybe it's just Chris Angel there. I don't know. He's just in there like a new episode of Mind Freak.
It does get weird with when Jessica sees the demon's face, though, because I don't think she saw Chris Angel. She describes it as a very grotesque looking face when she's having a sleep paralysis episode.
Yes, and sleep paralysis kind of it's interesting when you think about it. I don't know if any of you listeners have ever had it. I know a lot of people do. I know I'm kind of prone to bouts of sleep paralysis just because
I am as well.
I naturally lucid dream. I never even knew that you could dream anything other than like lucidly, because I always just ever since I was a kid, I'd start dreaming and be like, hey man, I could do whatever I want here. This is awesome. And people are like, oh no, that's lucid dreaming. You have to practice that. I'm like, I just always do. So I guess it makes me more prone to bouts of sleep paralysis. And if you ever have one, you normally see like shadows in the corner. You'll see things with like weird proportions. It's your mind's creating it because it's in that state between REM sleep and not. So it's really an interesting thing that she was able to see details on this thing's face. As she said, it felt like it was holding her down.
Honestly, that's probably the most terrifying instance I could ever imagine. I would never want that. It's terrifying enough to have sleep paralysis, but then to see a very well detailed demon face in your eyes, that no.
Just hold up, get this away from me.
That kind of brings me to more of the defense that they bring on into this house, which starts with Bob Cranmer deciding to throw as he describes it, a Hail Mary at this monster and bless the house himself, start reading some of the passages of exorcism.
Yeah, which is, to me, seems pretty dangerous. It's almost like some random person notices someone choking and saying, oh, it's okay. I once saw a video that someone performed an emergency tracheotomy, so I'm going to go do that right now. Chances are you're going to kill that person.
Yeah, it shouldn't go as well as you would hope. Normally, the Vatican recommends a cardinal or a bishop or somebody higher up. Even a priest can do it with a cardinal's okay to do so. Our cardinal's blessing, I should say.
Yeah, like as far as I always knew, you need to be specially trained to be an exorcist and sanctioned by the Catholic Church to perform the rites of exorcism. So it was strange that he notes this, but luckily it doesn't get that severe. I know there's also kind of a misstep, or at least I think so, later on when he invokes the help of the Penn State Paranormal Research Group. So yeah, we actually had an outside influence in this scenario. It was actually recommended by Father Ron Lengwin, now Archbishop Ron Lengwin, to bring in outside verification, which is kind of the Catholic Church's new policy when it comes to demonic possession, demonic infestation. They do want to get professional opinions or outside opinions just to take that extra step of precaution to make sure, hey, yeah, maybe we're not missing a mental illness, or maybe there's something else this could be attributed to. So they actually called in a group from Penn State College. They were called the Paranormal Research Group. Their leader, I don't know if you're familiar with the show Paranormal State, but their actual leader of this group was Ryan Buell, who was the star of Paranormal State all the way up until 2013 when the show stopped running. So we actually had like a later to be TV star in on this. So it's kind of interesting to know that we had this group come in and actually start doing research. I know they came in on one weekend and set up. They're doing a lot of temperature monitoring, things like that. A couple were very devout Catholics. Now it kind of carries into, as I said earlier, one of the, I guess, foul ups on here, at least I'd consider it, is they start trying to ask this thing its name, which,
yeah, that's not a good idea. Honestly, if you are inexperienced with that type of stuff, or you may not understand fully what you're getting yourself into, you could really do damage on yourself. It could even follow them home if they weren't careful enough.
Yeah, I always read that was kind of attributed to a very dangerous ground, because only trained professionals should be trying to gain the name of a demonic entity, because that name holds power over them, allegedly, according to exorcists and a lot of that, a lot of the like. But trying to get it when you're not really trained, I feel like that just kind of opens the door for a whole mess of stuff you don't want. And I guess it kind of even manifested itself. It was clawing people. Even just went in a little bit before there. It was known to claw the Cranmer family a little bit.
Honestly, I'm a little bit jealous that we couldn't get any videos of it, because they actually said on camera you could see one of the researchers there get a claw across his face, and they got it on camera when it happened.
If I'm not mistaken, it is the club advisor. He went into another room to kind of pray, and as he was praying, he saw like a bunch of entities throughout the house, and one of them actually turned and looked at him, and that's when he got up and he walked in with the other group, because he was just kind of, oh, I better be near people. And that's when a claw mark started manifesting across his forehead. They claim to have gotten this on footage, but we weren't able to procure that. I've sent a couple emails out and made some calls, but couldn't get anything.
Unfortunately, but who knows? Maybe season 2 we can bring that out, or semester 2.
Yes, and now we actually get into a little bit more of an interesting tactic that this research group pulled up, being using a psychic in Philadelphia by the name of Judy.
Now, psychics, that's kind of weird for a group that's kind of corresponding with the Catholic Church to use.
Well, it's actually not out of the ordinary for the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church have been known to sanction mystics for centuries, actually dating back. The earliest known psychic was, I believe, in 35 AD, just 2 years after the believed that Christ died in 33 AD. So the first well-known mystic being 35 AD. We even go forward a couple hundred years in the Catholic Church to one Father Padre Pio, who was actually believed to have fought with the devil during mass in church, like his robes being ripped, bruises appearing on his body. Like, imagine that, this man just like boxing up with, with the devil. He was also believed to have had the precognition of who the next pope would be.
The question is, though, did he win the title belt?
I don't know. I hope, like, if they someday unearth him, I hope there's a title belt in there, like, box with the devil. Like, yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, we had a kid that played the fiddle with the devil. This dude straight up boxed him.
Not gonna lie, though, the devil has lost in a fiddle match and a boxing match. What can this guy do?
Yeah, I mean, clearly the devil needs to kind of brush up his game a little bit. I'm assuming, like I said, if the little kid beats you in a fiddle off, maybe you shouldn't have gone into that one. But
maybe not.
Yes, so dialing back, because there's actually a couple other mystics that do show up within this story. One of the most prominent ones being Connie Valenti, who was helping relay information to Father Ron Langwin to tell him about, like, the history of the house. She claimed to have been able to see different things, see the past of the house, the presences, and what it was. And it was her belief now that this demonic presence was a direct result of Dr. Mahan Sr. and his illegal abortions performed in there, because it had captured the souls of those unborn children and was causing them to not be able to move on, and tied in with the curse and all the negative emotions surrounding this, that it caused the alleged demonic infestation of this house.
Now, you mentioned Judy with the PRG.
Mm-hmm.
Did she find anything that was of big importance?
According to their statements, she was actually able to use her abilities, or whatever they were, to find the lair of this demonic presence, or where it went to recharge, which is kind of an odd word, knowing the technological advancements we have today. Kind of like hold on, I got to go into this secret closet and plug in my demon. The future's kind of stupid.
I mean, it could have been wireless charging still, but even then,
my demon has wireless charging, so we really swung the extra bucks for quality.
We paid the extra $100 for that, but even still, having the layer being found behind the foyer coat closet is so weird, because they found a yellow Lego brick that belonged to Charlie, and they said that this was the major thing that it would use to kind of attack Charlie or do bad things to him.
Yeah, which is kind of funny that it uses a Lego brick. I can only imagine it waiting for Charlie to walk down the stairs. He just throws his Lego brick in front of him. He steps on it, falls down the stairs. It's just a bad time. We've all stepped on Lego bricks. But it's kind of also interesting that this now comes full circle back to that coat closet. So the significance of the coat closet, the blue room, and the basement correlates back to Dr. Mahan Sr. So the coat closet, they state, has significance because that's where Dr. Mahan would come in every day, hang up his cane, his hat, his coat. He'd go up to the blue room to perform these procedures. He'd wash off in the bathroom adjacent to it, which also had a presence, which was also reported to have that fluid, that birthing fluid-like stuff. And then he would burn the remains and all the sullied, like, sheets and everything like that in the wood burner in the basement, which I think would smell awful, because that wood burner actually was the heating source for that house at the time. So how does that how would that smell throughout that house if you're burning the aborted remains of like a fetus? Like that just,
Probably, I don't think you'd be able to eat very much in a house.
I do declare, Mrs. Malik, you must be cooking that famed rotisserie chicken again. I smell it up in the bathroom. It'd be horrible.
What's the weirdest part to me is that the coat closet is like the most haunted part of the house, and nothing bad happened there.
Yeah,
he just
nothing.
hung his coat and his cane.
Yeah,
how's that bad?
Yeah, that was my like, how dare this man, practice proper manners and hang his coat and hat up in the coat closet. That just, I don't know. I don't know how it became the focal point of this, but yeah, you're right. Nothing bad really happened there.
Now that they found the demon's lair, they started to kind of understand that the demon would go around the house. It would make the sulfur smell, and Bob would try to quote unquote expel the demon around the house, just fighting it everywhere. And they noticed, hey, it never went to this coat closet. That's how they did determine that it was its lair. And it got to the point where even he asked Father Langwin, hey, how do I continue my nightly activities with my wife? And he goes, well, you just continue it like nothing is happening, like it's normal.
Kind of odd, I think, for him to actually have even brought that up to a high-ranking Catholic priest. Like, hey, Father, how am I supposed to do it? Like, why would you even bring that up?
I don't know, but after he got the answer from that, he goes,
Father Langwin said, yeah,
we need to do this every night for the good of the cause, which is...
I mean, he took advantage of it like any guy really would take advantage.
Let's be honest, we all would.
Yeah, he'd be like, yeah, I got the word from a priest. He said it's okay. Well,
I mean, have to feel sorry for the demon.
Yeah,
at that point.
That would be awkward. Like, because, I mean, Father Langwin even says in there that a demon cannot witness the acts of a married man and woman, or a consummation of a married man and woman, because it's a quote unquote holy act. And he can't watch it. No, really, maybe not can't, but probably just doesn't want to, because that's just awkward. I mean, I can imagine this thing knocking on Bobby Jr.'s door in the blue room, like, hey man, your parents are at it again. I'm going to crash in your closet. I know there's a mattress in there already. I brought my pillow.
Just let me stay the night, too. This is getting nasty.
I'm going to crash in here. This is just awkward.
Just as crazy as it began, though, it ended, if not crazier.
Yeah, really weird way to end this whole thing.
And how it ended was, after Christmas time, they decided, hey, why don't we put all of the Christmas decorations in this thing's lair and fill up the room with it?
With Christmas decorations.
Honey, the Santa
get the inflatable Santa. Put it in there. It hates it. It can't stand it.
If it was anything else, I'd probably believe it, but
yeah, like
it's just Christmas decorations.
Yeah, like maybe a nativity scene I could see as like, okay, maybe that has importance. But when most people think Christmas decorations, and this didn't happen ages ago, it happened in the late 2000s. So it's just that fat inflatable Santa on an airplane. Just throw that in there. And the demon's like, I hate that thing. You paid $80 for this. It's a piece of junk.
After a couple more expelling sessions, they finally did supposedly get rid of it. Now, they never stated it's gone, but the house has remained safe ever since.
Now, that begs the question now. When Christmas comes around, they take out those Christmas ornaments. Does that bring it back? Does it come back now? Like, I'm alive again. All I could talk to was the Snoopy in Woodhouse.
I would love the fact that like the demon will like come out for like 2-3 months, then go right back into the closet. Kind of sad.
All right, back in the closet. We got all the stuff there. Yeah, I know.
I've done this for a couple years now.
I know the deal. And just walks in there. But yeah, so like you said, just on as odd of a note as it began with that coat closet and that light pull cord, it ends in the area behind the coat closet with a bunch of Christmas decorations.
Yeah, and supposedly it's been gone ever since. It even turned into a bed and breakfast now.
Yeah, you can actually stay the night. It's actually called the Grand Oaks Manor now, I believe. is
No
what it's-
ghost hunting.
No ghost hunting is allowed there. Apparently, you can't do any kind of paranormal investigations for fear of bringing this thing back. However, you can talk to Bob Cranmer for a fee.
Yes, which I mean, we don't have the money, or else we probably would have.
I would have probably asked a few fun questions with that. So tell me more about this this consummation with your wife that drove the demon.
With that note, we'd like to thank you guys for listening to our very first episode.
Yes, definitely. We can't thank you enough for embarking on this journey with us. It's been a lot of fun. And I do want to give a momentary shout out to our research team. We couldn't have really gotten this far without them and all the help that they've given us, especially you, Mr. McCracken. You've kind of been with us since day 3. I say it because not day 1. It's kind of in its fledgling stage. And then you offered your services and kind of blew up from there, as well as all of our listeners and everyone on our social media. We didn't expect them to blow up as much as they did, so we couldn't be more thankful.
And definitely be ready for the next episode, which is going to be on Hillview Manor.
Yes, a very historic legend here in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, or even Western PA as a whole. We can't really wait to get this out to you and all the interesting history that it has. It doesn't really fit the bill for most of these places that we go to. You know, most often than not, paranormal occurrences happen at psychiatric asylums, things like that. This place actually never was a psychiatric asylum. It was a poor farm that eventually became an old folks home. But there's apparently a lot of happenings there, a lot of alleged reports that gave it this kind of paranormal moniker. I know it was reviewed by Ghost Adventurers and Ghost Hunters, and they both found quite a bit of evidence there. So we can't wait to bring this to you guys.
And we like to take this time to talk about our Patreon, the Paranormal History Academy podcast's Patreon.
Yes, or as I like to call it, the Pahapapup.
Now, there are 3 different tiers, aren't there, Travis?
Yes, there are. There's the student tier for $5, the alumni tier for $10, and the founding alumni tier for $20. The founding alumni tier is only available for season 1 and gives you all the benefits of the prior tiers, as well as exclusive merchandise, bragging rights, and different goodies we're going to give you throughout the entire time of the podcast.
Yes, and you can keep that title for as long as this podcast runs and a little bit afterwards, too.
Yes, you can brag to your friends about something that they may not be aware of.
And also, I think the $10 tier gives you Discord access, does it not?
Yes, it does. It does give you access to our Discord servers, as well as some game servers, maybe. So you might be able to play some games with the Pahapapa team.
And we'd love to see you guys over there. We love having discussions with our fans and love just hanging out with you guys.